AI is not going to replace advisors by any stretch. It's going to make them better. They're going to be able to spend more time with their clients. They're going to be more present. And I think a lot of the back office administrative work will go by the wayside. If you don't leverage this type of technology, you will be left behind.
I want to welcome you to the Engaging Doctors podcast. If you are a financial advisor who wants to grow your business by working with more doctor clients, you are in the right place. I'm Dr. Vicki Rackner, your host. Have you ever wondered, how am I going to integrate AI into my business? My guest is Arnulf Hsu, founder and CEO of GReminders. Arnulf helps financial advisors cut down the busy work and enhance their workflow without causing additional disruptions. Arnulf, I want to welcome you to the Engaging Doctors podcast.
Vicki, thanks for having me.
What is the most important thing that you want listeners to take away?
I want financial advisors to spend time with their clients and not do rote administrative work. And in our opinion, and I think you'll see this in the industry, AI and automations can really make you superhuman, meaning that you should be able to do significantly more with the time that you have. And so systems like ours, along with others in the industry, are really doing that. And the sort of mode of just working in Outlook or Word or something like that, you really need to sort of step up your game. Again, systems like us are here to help you with that. And so, again, I would encourage your listeners to sort of explore these types of tools.
Could you please tell the listeners what you do and why you do it?
I'm the founder and CEO of a company called GReminders. We do end-to-end meeting management for financial advisors. So let me kind of break that down a little bit. So it's a little bit less abstract. So meeting management, you typically, advisors meet a lot with their clients. A lot of those types of activities tend to be manual. So we integrate deeply with the systems that financial advisors use every day: CRM, portfolio planning tools, email, web meeting tools, calendars, and so on and so forth. We understand the cadence that you have with your clients. So we would automatically reach out to your clients biannually, annually, quarterly, depending on, again, the level of service that you have with them. Get those meetings booked, right? So you get the review booked, the performance review booked for March, June, and so on and so forth. Once those are booked, we will kick off workflows and different types of things within the systems of record that you have. And we'll also send them email, SMS notifications to make sure that they show up to reduce any sort of no-shows. Now, before the meeting happens, we put together a very nice sort of pre-meeting brief. It's really a document that aggregates all the things that have happened since the last time you met with them, right? So we look through emails, we look through documents, financial statements, bank statements, trust statements, CRM, previous meeting notes, and put all that stuff together, again, leveraging sort of AI to help you with that. So something that maybe took a paraplanner 3 hours, 4 hours to do in the past is now being done in 5 minutes. From there, you can actually even build a presentation deck from that brief, right? So you have a document, you can also build a presentation deck, again, in 30 seconds. So you're better prepared for the meeting. You have the meeting. We have a note-taker product. It supports in-person. We have a mobile application, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, however you sort of meet with your clients, transcripts, and then outcome summaries, action items, so tasks that you need to do. Make sure those are tracked. Somebody's actually doing those. You can create opportunities and different types of things that you want to track. And then 30 seconds after the meeting, there's a nice, in your email Outlook, essentially in your drafts folder, there is a client email waiting for you to review and then send off to the client. And so again, like giving you a ton of time back, you spend time with the clients, sort of let the systems do a lot of the sort of admin work for you, and that's kind of what we call end-to-end meeting management.
And how did you come to develop this service?
So we didn't start with sort of this kind of holistic view of meeting management. We really started And if you look at the name of the company, it's really in this kind of email SMS space. So we started in 2020, but focused really heavily on wealth and financial advisors towards the end of 22, early 23, and started building integrations into the systems, right? So a lot of what we do is spend time in sort of data plumbing work, if you will. So a lot of the sort of ugly stuff that you kind of see, don't want to see, that's kind of behind the scenes. And started expanding the sort of capabilities to scheduling, sort of what we call putting reviews on autopilot. And then as sort of the advent of generative AI, which you really saw come to be maybe probably around that time, 21, 22, right? So ChatGPT, like, 2 and 3, and you started seeing these models come around that were actually quite really, really transformational and very useful. And we started, leveraging those when it came to transcripts, and again, sort of aggregating for these pre-meeting briefs and things of that nature. So very, very meaningful. And, over the years, we have developed effectively this platform that sort of spans, meeting management effectively. And again, trying to give significantly more time back so that you can be with your clients and grow your practice.
Well, could you tell us the story of a client who got time back?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So a lot of, if you think about, oftentimes we talk to financial advisors. There may be 5 advisors and then 15 staff, right? So that's or 10 staff, or there's usually like a 1-to-2 sort of ratio of advisor to staff. And if you think about staff, for example, they spend a lot of time in the back office doing a lot of these types of activities. And advisors are helping sort of put together client presentations. They're after the meeting, not only taking notes after the meeting, they're writing things back into their various systems of records and sort of things of that nature. That takes a tremendous amount of time, and the biggest constraint for an advisor, quite frankly, is time, right? If you look on average, advisors typically service maybe 100 clients. It sort of depends. If you can take that from 100 to 150, imagine the impact that would have on the business as a whole. If you have a multi-advisory practice with 5 or 10 or 20 advisors, again, do the math. It would be incredibly meaningful. Not just from a business standpoint, but also, in future, if you think about enterprise value of the business as a whole. There's a lot of M&A going on in the space. That obviously has a big impact ultimately on the value of what you're building. So we see on average advisors saving 500 to 600 hours per year per advisor. It's a really transformational sort of thing that's happening.
That's a big wow, because if you could divert that time to marketing and prospecting, that can make a huge difference in a business.
Yeah, and there's a ton of, by the way, like on the marketing and prospecting side of things, so we tend to be more on sort of the client engagement, but there's a tremendous amount of exciting things happening on this sort of on the prospecting and marketing side of things. Again, also leveraging data and AI personalization around reaching out to clients at the right moment, right, where they have different life events. And so on and so forth. So again, there's a ton of exciting stuff happening sort of on the prospecting side of things that I encourage folks to look at as well.
Okay, so you can take tasks that are done manually and you can outsource them to sort of AI, if you will. Can you up level performance? Like, does your product help have more engaging conversations with prospects and clients?
I would certainly say yes. And so let me give you a couple like very specific examples. And they really tend to stem from things that happened in the past, right? So if you had a conversation a year ago with a client, you talked about you talked about maybe maybe a child being born or something like that, or a job change or something along those lines. Maybe they weren't ready for a 529 plan. Maybe they weren't ready for a 401k rollover. Maybe they weren't ready for different types of products or services or annuities and so forth. But you talked about them and you mentioned them. If you wrote them down somewhere, there's a good chance that probably got lost, right? And so again, if the systems can remind you of the things that you talked about, again, not that were concrete necessarily to do immediately, but things that you might want to come revisit in the past, and AI can surface or automations can surface those things at the right time. That's going to have a very meaningful impact in the conversation that you have, and ultimately should lead to growth in the practice. And so, a lot of the things that are happening in the background are either not being captured or not being surfaced at the right time. And that's, I think, where, again, sort of back to, the data plumbing and access to the right systems and the right data pieces at the right time can really make an impact.
All right. Well, I know some advisors in this community record their sales calls, record their appointments, and then ask AI, hey, how can I do better? What could I do differently next time? What questions could I ask to lead to increasing engagement? Do you find that your clients are using those kinds of resources?
So we're starting to. So it's very early days still, but we're starting to see people use these types of transcripts effectively as coaching opportunities, right? And so if you can identify a high quality call that has the various attributes that you're looking for, right? You can basically get AI to score those calls for you. And then if you look at those on an aggregate basis, you can look at them per person, you can look at them across a certain time period, and then see if those individuals are getting better or not. And that is also, again, back to like, do you have the data to actually, look at the metrics so that you can, track that? And, I think David or Peter Drucker, said you can't, you can't measure or you can't manage what you can't measure, right? And so going back to data and being able to look at the various metrics and so forth that ultimately drive positive outcomes is ultimately what you want to do. So number one, got to have the data. Number two, got to have the systems that support those types of outcomes.
Got it. Now, you had just mentioned an example of a 5-person firm. How big do you need to be to really avail yourself of this technology?
You need to have some customers, right? You need to have some clients, but it doesn't. You can really be a single. We have plenty of folks that are single advisories, and that scale all the way up to 50, 100, 200 advisors, right? So this really, when you get to a certain size, you get the benefits of scale. But I would argue that if you're one or two people in a small practice, you probably need more scale, right? And you don't have the resources to do that. And so you could potentially, remain one or two or three people, again, by leveraging AI and automations, probably gives you another full-time person. Just like that capability is really another individual. And I would also say that, like, if you're looking at staff in general, look for staff that actually sort of understands how to use some of these more modern tools, right? Like, they need to be somewhat tech savvy to some degree, and sort of started to embrace be it just ChatGPT like on its own, or different sort of AI assistant tools. But then again, like, you can start looking at vertical tools like ourselves as an example, that sort of have a lot of the connections.
Now, I feel very fortunate that we are together because I know you're so busy, it's time to get time on your calendar. What do you think has led to the success of your organization?
Oh, I think this is whole as sort of an industry as a whole, but AI has certainly given a tailwind to almost all software companies, right? So we're a software company, and it's really given a boost in terms of capabilities and demand, right? So AI has been talked about for several years, really. It's certainly recently with the advent of sort of generative AI. You probably can't have a conversation without it. It certainly dominates the airwaves if you go to any event and those types of things. But it is real. It is a real thing. And so, when you look at AI and automations, you need to look at three aspects, okay? So you need to look at the data that supports it. So that's really critical. If you do not have access to the right data elements, the AI isn't going to work, right? It's going to, you've heard the hallucinations and these types of terms. It's not going to work. So you got to make sure that you have access to the right data. And that's actually not that easy to do, right? Because if you think about all of the different systems that you are using every day, you log into, 5, 6, 7, 8 different systems. The AI needs to have access to those systems. If it doesn't, it cannot produce the outputs that you're looking for. Okay, so that's one. And then do you have sort of the instruction set and the workflows, right? That sort of are sit on top of that kind of data layer. And then it's a question of like, are you using the right LLMs or the right models, if you will? And again, so you kind of have to have those three parts. And so that's why for us, we spend a lot of time making sure we have access to the right data and again, supporting the workflows. And the AI part is almost the easy part because we're sitting on top of giants when it comes to that piece.
Well, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see financial advisors making when it comes to leveraging AI for practice growth?
I think so the consumer world is far ahead of the business or enterprise world when it comes to AI, right? So it's very easy to spin up, Alexa Plus or ChatGPT and start asking questions and getting pretty amazing results. But when you start asking for information that sits inside your business, you're not going to get any results, right? Because there's no data access, back to access to data. And so it's very easy, I think, for if you sit in sort of the C-suite, if you will, it's very easy to say, oh, AI is going to take care of that for us to some degree. But you got to have the systems that actually understand, where do the documents for the Jones household live? Are those trust documents or those bank statements there? Do we have access to the CRM and the records and your sort of system of record? Do we understand, the emails and the meetings that have been, performed in the past? Do we have access to those, right? So again, back to the data side of things, I think it's very easy to sort of, give a blanket statement of, AI will take care of that. But in fact, you need to understand, some of how is the AI going to actually get access to those things in order to, again, produce the outputs that you want. And so we talk a lot about sort of, AI being this kind of invisible partner that sort of sits in the background. But again, access to the right information at the right time is really, really critical.
So, what are some of the parts of your learning curve that you want to help your clients avoid?
Know what you know and know what you don't know, right? I think it's important to have an open mind about things. And, we see we implement thousands of advisory practices on a regular basis. So we probably have, at least 2,000 probably implementations under our belts. And so we see a lot. There are generally best practices around how to organize things, how to sort of build an operational stack, if you will, within a practice. so there are generally some best practices around how to operate those. And yes, each practice has nuances, but I would say, you want to try, if you possibly can, try to leverage those best practices where you can, as opposed to trying to be sort of the unicorn. And be open to maybe some modifications on how you do things. Because typically when you sort of, swim alongside most, those systems will perform better because you actually use them in the way that they were intended. And so we see a lot of unique use cases that we then try to sort of, morph into a somewhat more homogeneous stack, if you will.
And do you make recommendations for tech stacks like Go High Level, Salesforce, whatever?
We try to stay agnostic where possible. We will definitely make recommendations on systems that we integrate with, right? So if you decide to use some esoteric CRM that we don't integrate with, then a lot of the benefit is lost. Again, it's really back to the data. But when it comes to systems that we do integrate with, we are really agnostic about those types of vendors. And to be honest, a lot of, if you look at CRMs as a whole, just as we'll take CRM as an example, they are all somewhat similar, right? They have similar structures. They have households, they have context, they have notes, they have documents, different things like that. They are similar in nature. Most of it, honestly, comes down to the implementation of it and the usage of it. And so, we hear a lot, we're thinking about switching to CRM, we're thinking about switching this planning tool, and then we always ask, so what is the reason for that? And usually the answer is, we're using it more as a Rolodex. We don't have the adoption. So now let's peel the onion and let's try to understand, okay, so what is the reason for that? And typically it's lack of process, operational, infrastructure that is not in place. And that's usually a process people issue more than it is a technology issue. And we tend to sit on top of these systems. So we try to minimize change management as much as possible. And we also try to make the utility of those systems richer. Okay, so let me just speak to that. So a CRM is wonderful, but in the past it has required people to do all this data entry, right? And so if you can organically improve the quality of that data through just sending emails, having conversations with clients, where those meeting notes, those emails, those tasks are automatically being pushed back, right? Automatically being pushed back into your system of record. Now you have more visibility into what's going on. And guess what? The next meeting you have is going to be better because the data is going to be there to support it, and the AI is going to be able to read it. So a lot of these systems are sort of, they create a better system over time.
I am going to ask you a tough question now. If you were to look into your crystal ball, do you have any projections about how in 3-5 years AI is going to change the practice of financial advisors?
I think it's going to make financial advisors better. So we say AI is sort of the invisible partner. I truly believe that. And again, I think if you hire staff, they need to be very technically savvy to understand how to harness those systems. In my opinion, if you don't leverage this type of technology, you will be left behind.
And what do you say to the advisor who has the fear, I need to look for another career, AI is going to replace me? They don't agree with you.
I don't think so. I'll tell you why I don't think so, because they can do this today already, right? So customers can go sign up for some service and get a robo-advisor. They can do that today already if they wanted to do that. I think financial advisory is relationship and trust based. It's a high touch sort of engagement, and that is valued. And yes, you are seeing folks sort of age out and go to the next generation. But at the end of the day, I do think that trust and value are really the core tenets of advisories. However, maybe the way that they engage, right? The way that they engage may change over time. So, things like text messaging and some of those types of, communications, that is becoming a bit more sort of, mainstream, if you will. And again, I think AI can really improve your operational practices and can also help you significantly sort of on the prospecting side as well. So I think it's going to level up the game, quite frankly.
And if any financial advisor wants to get a little taste of your product and service, what would you recommend to them?
Yeah, please go to our website, GReminders.com. You can also reach out to me directly. I'll give you my email address. It's arnold@GReminders.com.
Great. And I will leave the contact information in the show notes below. Is there a question that I've forgotten to ask or a message that you'd like to communicate?
We would love folks to use systems like ours. Again, it's really giving you, you did not become a financial advisor to do sort of rote administrative work. Let automation and AI do that for you and let you focus on your practice.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your opening the curtain and showing us how people are using AI in their practices.
Thank you, Vicki.
What are some of the most common questions that financial advisors ask you?
I mean, they're really trying to figure out how to better operationalize themselves. I mean, that's really what we see all the time. How do we become better? How do we become more efficient? Getting bogged down with simple things like scheduling, making sure clients show up, and then really they get their eyes opened when note taker. There's a lot of stuff going on in the note taking space, so people are starting to understand the value of that. But like the pre-meeting briefs, and then we're launching AI documents, which is essentially access to financial statements and trusts and all kinds of things like that. And so like AI assistants, getting the thing to do stuff for you, those are, I would say, new, nascent things that people are starting to really benefit from. But there's also like, somewhat of a level of skill that's required because it is a different way of operating, right? Before you said, hey Susie, go do X, Y, and Z. And now, you're asking sort of this assistant to do it. And you may need to tweak the way that you ask it. And just like you probably use AI yourself, you've probably leveled up on how you ask questions, right? And that you make certain assumptions if you talk to a staff member, but maybe you can't make those same sort of assumptions when you're talking to the system. So there's a learning curve, I think, on certainly that, and that's improving across the board, just as people use this both in their consumer lives as well as in their business life.
So you're balancing AI, but there are compliance and privacy requirements, right?
So compliance is also a big question. Didn't really even touch upon it, but we do everything in a very compliant-friendly way. I mean, it's a very compliant, regulatory-heavy space. So everything that we do from a client standpoint is journaled and archived. So archive and journaling is a huge thing. So that's as far as client-facing stuff, but also where we store the data, security, privacy, that type of stuff. But then a lot of what we do is also back office stuff, which is non-client-facing, just making the advisor better at what they're doing. So there's as long as you have sort of the security and privacy aspects sorted, so we're like SOC 2 and so on and so forth. And then you work with compliance on any sort of client engagement stuff that's basically journaled and archived back, make sure we have disclosures, etc. We work with a lot of broker dealers, so we go through their compliance and approval processes like Osaic and Cambridge and Gestra and Cetera and so on and so forth. And then we kind of market, to their affiliate firms. So that's a big part of our go-to-market.
And if any financial advisor wants to get a little taste of your product and service, what would you recommend to them?
Yeah, please go to our website, GReminders.com. You can also reach out to me directly. I'll give you my email address. It's arnold@GReminders.com.
Great. And I will leave the contact information in the show notes below. Well, thank you again. And again, if you would like to reach out and learn more, I will leave a link below.